The vast laboratory on the Galactic Research Station was filled with the quiet hum of alien machines. Silver panels glowed with strange blue light, and transparent screens floated in midair, covered in equations no human had ever seen. Every being in that room stared when the human entered. She walked in slowly, her boots echoing against the polished floor. Her name was Dr. Elena Ward, the first human scientist to stand before the Galactic Council. Dozens of alien researchers, tall and thin with green or grey skin, turned to look at her. Some whispered to each other in their own language. Others smiled with quiet arrogance. To them, Earth was young, primitive and small. They believed humans were good at fighting, not thinking. And now, one of those primitive beings had come to speak about gravity, the one thing the galaxy thought it had mastered long ago. Elena stood calmly in the center of the lab. The air smelled like metal and ozone. The alien's eyes followed her every move. The council's chief scientist, a tall, blue-skinned being named Zalen, stepped forward with a smooth, cold smile. "Welcome, human," he said, his voice echoing softly. "We are curious to see what your world knows about forces you can barely control." Elena nodded politely. "Thank you for the invitation," she said simply. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. On the large screen behind Zalen, a holographic image of Earth rotated slowly. "Your planet's gravity is weak," Zalen continued, looking at her like a teacher scolding a child. "It explains your limited physical and technological development. You live under a soft weight. That must make you fragile." A few aliens laughed quietly. Elena didn't. She just tilted her head slightly, observing the floor beneath her boots. The light reflected on its surface, smooth and perfect like glass. She took a slow breath. "Gravity is not weak," she said, her tone gentle. "It's only honest. It tells us what we really are." That sentence made some of the aliens frown. Others looked amused. Zalen smiled wider. "Honest," he repeated. "Your species uses myths when it cannot understand science." Elena smiled faintly. "Maybe, but sometimes myths protect truths until we're ready to face them." The silence that followed was sharp. Then Zalen waved his long hand. "Enough philosophy. You said you have something to demonstrate. Very well. Show us what Earth calls gravity." A long metallic table extended from the wall. Instruments floated above it, projecting readings into the air. Elena walked over slowly, her eyes scanning the alien technology. Every detail was perfect, every measurement exact. They had calculated everything about their gravity, or so they believed. She looked at them. "May I have something small?" she asked. "Something simple to drop." The aliens exchanged confused looks. One of them, a scientist with silver eyes, gave a short laugh. "A demonstration with a drop. What is this, children's play?" Elena didn't respond. Her calmness was starting to make them nervous. Zalen gestured, and one assistant brought her a stylus pen, thin and metallic. Elena took it in her hand, weighing it slightly. She stepped back toward the center of the room. "You said our gravity is weak," she said softly. "So tell me, how strong is yours?" A few aliens chuckled again. "Ours is stable, controlled, the result of superior physics." Elena nodded slowly. "Then let's test it." She opened her fingers and let the pen fall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air changed. The pen didn't just fall. It slammed into the floor like a meteor hitting steel. The ground cracked in a spiderweb pattern, the sound sharp and echoing through the lab. A small cloud of dust rose from the impact. Every alien froze. The room went silent. Monitors flickered. The pen lay embedded in the fractured floor, surrounded by thin lines of broken metal and glowing dust. What did you do?" Zalen whispered, his composure breaking. Elena looked down at the cracked floor and then back at him. "I dropped a pen," she said simply. The alien scientists rushed forward, scanning the readings. Gravity fields had spiked for a fraction of a second, impossibly strong, like the pull of a black hole compressed into a tiny point. Machines beeped, alarms flashed. "The data made no sense. This is impossible," one alien muttered. "A pen cannot create a shock wave." Elena looked around at them, her expression still calm. "You told me our gravity was weak," she said. It isn't weak. It's personal. It listens to us now. The aliens stared at her, their faces pale with confusion. Zarlen slammed his hands on the table. You tampered with our field generators. No, Eleanor replied softly. I didn't touch anything. I only showed you what happens when gravity remembers its maker. Her words hung heavy in the air. The cracked floor gleamed under the bright lab lights. The pen still trembled faintly, as if the force within it hadn't fully stopped. The aliens backed away, whispering to each other. Human technology. Impossible. Unnatural. Elena stepped closer to the pen and crouched down. She touched the edge of the crack with her fingertips. The surface still felt warm. You've been trying to control gravity for centuries, she said quietly. We learned to talk to it. The words sent chills through the room. Then she stood up, dusted her hands, and looked around. So, she said with a faint smile, shall we continue the discussion? No one answered. Every alien in that lab now looked at her with the same expression, fear. The woman they had mocked was now standing over a cracked floor, and a simple pen had made their entire lab tremble. Far outside the station's window, Earth's blue glow shimmered in the distance, small, quiet, and powerful. The galaxy had laughed at its gravity. Now it was learning respect. The lab was still shaking when the emergency sirens began to howl. Red lights flashed across the silver walls, and the holographic screens flickered with error messages in dozens of alien languages. The pen that had cracked the floor still lay embedded in the metal tiles, glowing faintly from the pressure it had unleashed. Alien scientists scrambled across the room, shouting readings to each other, their voices rising in disbelief. Gravity field spike, 10,000% deviation. One shouted. Mass density fluctuation off all charts. Another turned toward Elena, eyes wide with accusation. What did you do to our station? Elena stood perfectly still. Her hands were by her sides, calm, unshaken. You built this lab to study forces, she said softly. Now you've met one that doesn't follow your equations. The head scientist, Zarlen, slammed his hand against the nearest console, his blue skin glowing with stress. You destabilized the core. This room could implode. His voice was half panic, half fury. Elena looked at him with a steady gaze. Then perhaps your walls were never strong enough to face the truth. The floor cracked again, with a slow groan, thin lines spreading outward like veins of lightning. Every alien froze, terrified. One assistant floated off the ground for a brief moment before crashing back down. The air itself felt heavier, as though the gravity of the entire planet had shifted. What is happening? Cried one of the engineers. The readings are behaving as if the mass itself is listening, responding to her. Elena finally stepped forward. Her boots pressed against the damaged floor, the sound echoing in the tense silence. You wanted a demonstration, she said quietly. Now you have one. Gravity is not only a force, it's a memory. A relationship between matter and intention. The aliens stared in disbelief. That's not possible, Zarlen hissed. You speak nonsense. Gravity doesn't think. It doesn't obey emotion, Elena smiled faintly. You believe in numbers. I believe in understanding. We studied gravity until it became personal. We stopped measuring it and we started listening. The lights flickered once more, then stabilized. Slowly, the hum of the machines returned. The crisis alarms dimmed into silence. The floor stopped moving, but the crack remained. A scar across their perfect lab. Zarlen glared at her. You've violated Council safety law. You will be detained until we can understand this. Anomaly. Anomaly? She repeated softly. You call what you don't understand an anomaly. But you've built your entire science on half-truths. You treat nature like a machine, not like something alive. Two guards approached her, tall, armored aliens with glowing visors. One reached out to take her arm. Before his hand could touch her, a sudden force threw him back several feet, as if the air itself had pushed him away. The guards looked stunned. The other one froze mid-step, afraid to move closer. Elena's voice was quiet but firm. You should not touch me right now. The gravity around me isn't stable. It remembers the insult. Every eye in the room turned toward her, fear widening their pupils. Zarlen's voice trembled now, though he tried to sound calm. Your species, have done something unnatural. What you just described goes beyond the laws of physics. Elena turned her head slowly. Every law begins as a limitation, she said. We just stopped believing in them. She looked down at the cracked floor again. Her reflection shimmered in the dust and light. We were told for centuries that Earth's gravity made us slow, heavy, weak. But in truth, it made us closer to the ground. It made us listen to the pull of the world beneath our feet. Every step taught us respect for force, not fear of it. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the low hum of cooling systems filled the air. The lab's atmosphere felt thicker, almost reverent. Finally, Zarlen gestured toward a console. Lock down this area, he commanded weakly. We must contain her. Send for the council. As the guards hesitated, Elena tilted her head slightly, watching the ceiling lights above. Contain me? She murmured. You cannot contain what you don't understand. Without warning, the pen on the floor began to move. It lifted an inch into the air, floating gently, spinning in slow rotation. Every instrument in the room started to blink and scream with data overload. A magnetic pulse rippled through the floor, and several pieces of equipment lifted from their mounts before falling again. The aliens backed away in terror. Elena raised her eyes, watching the pen float. You see, she said quietly, it's still listening. The pen dropped suddenly, landing without a sound this time, and the lights went dead. Total darkness filled the room. Only Elena's outline remained visible in the emergency glow, calm and centered. When the power returned a few seconds later, everything was silent again. The floor was stable. The machines had reset, but every alien stood motionless, too afraid to speak. Elena looked at Zarlen and said in a low voice, Now, do you still think gravity belongs only to you? His voice cracked as he whispered, What are you? Human, she answered simply. But not the kind you remember. Security drones entered the lab with sharp buzzing sounds. They surrounded her, small red sensors scanning her movements. Elena didn't resist. She looked at the nearest alien officer. You're going to take me to your council, she said. Good. That's exactly where I need to go. The officer hesitated, unsure if the human was dangerous or divine. He finally nodded and gestured for her to follow. As they walked out, the lab's cracked floor remained behind, a mark of something that shouldn't have been possible. The scientists stood around it, whispering. One muttered, if she can do that with a pen, what could she do with a planet? No one answered. Outside the viewport, the stars looked still, but deep within that silence, something in the galaxy had shifted. The Council had mocked humanity for centuries, but now, for the first time, they were afraid. The corridors of the galactic station were cold and endless. Light pulsed faintly through the metal walls, and each step echoed like a heartbeat. Dr. Elena Ward walked between two guards, her wrists surrounded by a shimmering magnetic field. They didn't dare touch her. They only guided her forward, their movements stiff with fear. As she passed through the halls, alien workers stopped to stare. Whispers followed her. The human who cracked the lab floor, the one who bends gravity, the Earth-born anomaly. Some of them looked curious, others terrified, but most looked like they were watching something dangerous, something they wished they could unsee. The doors to the interrogation chamber opened with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was circular and bright, its floor made of the same polished alloy as the lab. A long table of transparent crystal stood at the center, surrounded by alien officers in dark robes. In the highest chair sat Councillor Verith, older, grey-skinned and respected across the galaxy. His large black eyes blinked slowly as Elena entered. Dr. Ward, he said, his voice deep and smooth, you have caused great disruption in a restricted scientific facility. We require an explanation. Elena looked around the room. The table shimmered with light, recording every motion. You don't want an explanation, she said calmly. You want reassurance that your laws still make sense. The guards flinched slightly, but Verith only smiled, showing small, sharp teeth. You seem confident, human. Confidence is often a symptom of ignorance. Elena met his gaze, unshaken. Then you must live with a great deal of confidence, Counselor. The room went quiet. A few of the officers exchanged uneasy glances. Vareth's smile faded. "Let's begin," he said coldly. "Explain the nature of your demonstration. How did a simple object, your pen, generate such gravitational force?" Elena clasped her hands together on the table. "It didn't generate anything new," she said softly. "It only revealed what was already present." Vareth frowned. "You mean gravity?" "No," she replied. "Memory. Gravity remembers the shape of everything that has ever pressed against it. It holds impressions of time, of emotion, of life itself. We learned to speak its language." The aliens murmured among themselves. One leaned forward, his golden eyes narrow. "Are you suggesting consciousness within a field force?" Elena shook her head. "Not consciousness, recognition. Every atom recognizes the presence of another. Gravity is that recognition stretched across space. When we learned how to align human intention with gravitational resonance, it started responding differently." "You're describing fantasy," said Vareth. "A mystical theory, not science." "Science is only mystical," Elena said softly, "until it works." The words hung heavy in the air. One of the younger scientists stepped closer, holding a tablet that displayed a still image of the cracked lab floor. "You altered our gravity field without direct interference," he said. "That's impossible. Even our reactors can't manipulate force density at that scale." Elena looked at the image, her reflection faintly visible on the glass. "Your reactors push," she said. "We ask." Vareth leaned back. "You're implying communication with gravity." "Oh," Elena hesitated. For the first time her voice softened. "Through resonance fields tied to emotional frequency. The heart produces subtle gravitational fluctuations when under strong feeling, fear, love, sorrow. We discovered how to amplify that pattern and imprint it into physical matter. Our engineers found it by accident, fixing a reactor damaged during a solar storm. A worker's heartbeat synchronized with the stabilizer, and the field changed shape. We repeated the result. Then we realized emotion bends reality when gravity listens." The room went silent. An officer whispered, "You weaponized emotion?" Elena looked at him. "No, we understood it." Vareth's expression darkened. "That is not understanding, it is danger. The galaxy cannot tolerate such unstable power in primitive hands." "Primitive?" she echoed, her tone sharpening. "You still think like rulers. You build cages for the universe and call them theories. We build homes within it." The guards tensed. Vareth's voice grew colder. "You will surrender your research. Humanity will submit all data regarding this technique." Elena smiled faintly. "You believe we would share something we bled for? We earned this through centuries of pain, loss, and perseverance. Every step, every fall, every life pulled down by gravity. It taught us something. You mocked our weakness, but our weakness was our teacher." Vareth's eyes narrowed. "You speak like a philosopher, not a scientist." She leaned forward slightly. "Maybe because your science forgot to feel." Vareth slammed his hand on the table, and the crystal surface rippled with energy. "Enough! You will comply with the council, or Earth will be sanctioned." Elena didn't flinch. "Then sanction us," she said quietly. "But remember this. You're afraid not because of what I did, but because you realized you never truly understood the world you live in." The guards stepped closer. The atmosphere grew heavy. Instruments began to flicker again. One of the lights above them dimmed slightly, trembling in its socket. Vareth stared at the ceiling, then back at her. "You're doing it again." Elena didn't move. "No," she said calmly. "It's doing it on its own. Gravity is listening to your fear." The officers looked around nervously as the table began to vibrate, subtle at first, then stronger. Loose papers fluttered. A glass container shattered. One guard stumbled backward. "Stop this!" Vareth shouted. Elena stood slowly, her voice quiet. "I told you I'm not in control. You are, every one of you. Your fear is feeding it." The lights flickered wildly, then stabilized. The vibration stopped. Silence filled the room again. Elena looked around. "Now you understand what we live with every day on Earth, the pull that never stops. We learned to live in harmony with it. You try to dominate it, and it resists." Vareth stared at her with trembling hands. "You're dangerous." She gave a small nod. No, Counselor. Just human. Two guards moved behind her again, hesitant. Take her to isolation, Vareth ordered, his voice shaking slightly. As they led her away, Elena glanced over her shoulder. You can lock me up, she said, but you can't lock away gravity. It's already listening. The doors sealed behind her. Inside the chamber, the council members sat frozen, staring at the faint hairline crack that had appeared beneath their table. None of them spoke. Outside, the stars drifted silently, their light touching the edges of the station. Somewhere beyond, Earth rotated quietly, small, fragile, and far more powerful than anyone had realized. The holding chamber was built for war criminals, not scientists. Its walls were layered with magnetic shielding and energy dampeners, designed to contain beings far stronger than humans. Yet the moment Dr. Eleanor Ward stepped inside, the lights flickered faintly, as if even the systems could sense her presence. She sat on a narrow metal bench, her hands resting calmly on her knees. Outside the glass barrier, guards stood rigid, whispering to each other in low, fearful tones. They had seen what happened in the lab, and none of them wanted to be the one responsible for provoking her. Hours passed in silence until the door hissed open. Zarlen, the blue-skinned scientist she'd humiliated earlier, entered the cell block with 3 soldiers and a hovering data sphere. His expression was strained, pride mixed with curiosity. Elena Ward, he said formally, his voice echoing against the metal. The Council demands a controlled demonstration. You will repeat your experiment under our supervision. Any attempt to deceive or manipulate will be considered an act of aggression. Elena raised her head slowly. So, she said, you want another pen drop? Proceed, Zarlen said sharply. She looked down at the table. The air felt heavy, thicker than before. You all think I'm going to perform a trick, she said softly. But this isn't a trick. It's a conversation. The aliens stared in silence. Elena took a slow breath, closed her eyes, and whispered something under her breath, words too soft for the recorders to catch. Then she opened her hand. The pen began to fall. At first, it seemed ordinary, just a slow descent through the still air. But then, halfway down, the entire chamber shifted. The lights dimmed, the hum of machinery trembled, and a deep vibration rolled through the walls. The pen struck the table, and the surface buckled. Not shattered this time, but bent inward, like space itself had flexed around the impact. The sound wasn't an explosion. It was a deep, low tone that vibrated in the chest of everyone watching. Gravity spiked for half a second. The floating instrument slammed downward. Alarms blared as the artificial field generators overloaded. A few scientists screamed, clinging to railings as the zero-gravity system collapsed. And then, as suddenly as it began, everything went still. The pen lay quietly in the dented surface, glowing faintly from the friction heat. Zarlen's voice cracked. What did you do? Elena looked up at him. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet intensity. I reminded gravity who made it. The council observers began shouting orders, collecting data. Field collapse rate, -4% curvature. Energy readings. Impossible values. Localized mass gain without external source. The data didn't make sense. It defied their physics entirely. Zarlen leaned forward, trembling. No technology we possess can do this, he whispered. Elena's tone remained gentle. Because you keep trying to control it. We learned that you can't control what you don't respect. Gravity is not a servant. It's a partner. You're saying it chooses to obey you? It doesn't obey, she said. It responds. The Councillor Vareth entered the room then, flanked by armed guards. His expression was unreadable. He looked at the dented table, the pen still pulsing faintly with residual force. End the test, he ordered, and take her back. But before the guards could move, Elena spoke again. You're afraid, Counselor. Not because of what I did, but because you felt it. That pull, that weight, it connected with you. It always does. Vareth's voice was tight. Enough. This demonstration is over. Elena picked up the pen. For a moment, her reflection appeared in its polished surface, small, human, fragile. She looked at it with quiet pride. When you mocked Earth's gravity, she said, you mocked everything that shaped us, our oceans, our mountains, even our hearts. Gravity kept us humble. It kept us alive. You learned how to escape it. We learned how to listen to it. As she spoke, the lights flickered again, not from malfunction this time, but in rhythm with her voice. Every word resonated like an invisible pulse through the chamber's walls. "Stop this," Vareth demanded, stepping forward. But it was too late. The energy sensors began flashing red. The gravitational field inside the room was shifting again, bending gently toward Elena. The guards staggered as their boots grew heavier. One dropped to a knee, unable to move. Elena raised her eyes slowly. "You wanted proof. You're standing in it." The room trembled, then steadied. The pressure faded. When she finally exhaled, the readings returned to normal. The guards backed away, pale and silent. Vareth stared at her, unable to find words. Elena placed the pen back on the table, exactly where it had fallen. "Now," she said quietly, "you know what happens when Earth decides to drop something heavier than a pen." The silence that followed was longer than any they'd experienced before. Every scientist in that room knew this wasn't the peak of humanity's power. It was just a whisper of it. As they escorted her out, the floor beneath the table continued to ripple faintly, as though the memory of her gravity still lingered, and somewhere, far below on Earth, tides shifted a little higher than usual that night, as if the planet itself had heard her demonstration and smiled. News of the demonstration spread faster than light. Within hours, every corner of the Galactic Council's communication grid buzzed with reports, speculation, and fear. Broadcasts replayed the footage again and again. The human woman dropping a pen, the table bending as if space itself had bowed to her will. Some called it a hoax, others whispered it was divine power. But deep down, every scientist, soldier, and leader in the galaxy felt the same cold truth. The humans had done something no one else could. On the observation deck of the galactic station, Councillor Vareth stood alone, staring out at the stars. His reflection hovered faintly in the glass, eyes dark with worry. For the first time in decades, he felt uncertain. The galaxy had mocked Earth as backward, fragile, a world barely out of its gravity well. Yet now, that same gravity had turned into a weapon, or worse, a language humans could command. Behind him, Zarlen entered the room, his usual arrogance replaced with tight unease. "The council chambers are in chaos," he said quietly. "Half the sectors want to sanction Earth. The others want to negotiate before it's too late." Vareth didn't turn around. "And you? What do you want, scientist?" Zarlen hesitated. "To understand," he admitted. "If what she says is true, then everything we know about physics is a lie. If it's not, then she's the greatest deceiver the stars have ever seen." "She's neither," Vareth murmured. "She's human. That's the part we keep underestimating." Across the station, Dr. Elena Ward sat in a smaller chamber, no longer a prison cell, but still under heavy guard. She had been given food, water, and a chair near the viewport. She watched the curve of a distant moon through the glass, her expression thoughtful. The guards stood several meters away, not daring to come closer. When the door opened again, it wasn't a guard who entered. It was a council messenger, a young alien officer whose skin shimmered faintly like glass. His hands trembled as he spoke. "Dr. Ward, the council requests your presence once more. They want answers." Elena rose slowly. "Or they want control," she said softly. "It's always one of the two." The officer said nothing. He simply led her through the corridors again. This time no one laughed, no one sneered. Every being they passed stepped aside in silence, watching her with wide, uncertain eyes. Some nodded slightly, not in respect but in fear. When the doors to the council chamber opened, the room was full. Holographic projections of leaders from dozens of worlds flickered around the perimeter, their translucent forms forming a glowing circle of authority. Vareth sat at the center, and beside him, Zarlen stood with folded arms. "Elena Ward of Earth," Vareth began, his voice more cautious than commanding, "you have caused a disturbance of great magnitude. Entire colonies are afraid. The mining guilds fear your planet might disrupt orbital stability. The War Council is already preparing contingencies. You must tell us what your people truly intend. Elena met his gaze calmly. You think we intend war? Vareth's jaw tightened. You've demonstrated a force capable of collapsing ships, stations, even stars. What are we supposed to think? She stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. That we learned something you refused to see. You built your empire by defying gravity, by floating above planets, ignoring the weight that birthed you. You forgot what it means to belong to a world. Earth never did. Every mountain, every step, every life, gravity shaped us. We respected it. And in time, it started respecting us back. A murmur rippled through the holographic assembly. A representative from the Yaltesh Empire hissed, "That sounds like mythology, not science." Elena turned toward the glowing projection. Mythology is the memory of science that hasn't been rediscovered yet. Zarlen frowned deeply. If what you say is true, then your entire planet is a threat to galactic stability. We must know how many humans possess this ability. Elena smiled faintly. You think this is about one person? About control. She shook her head. It's not something you use. It's something you earn. Earth scientists, soldiers, engineers, they don't control gravity. They live with it. The ability you saw isn't a weapon. It's a reflection of understanding. It's not transferable. Vareth studied her carefully. And yet you can do it. Yes, she said quietly. Because I remember where I come from. The room fell silent again. For a moment, the faint hum of the station's engines was the only sound. Then from one of the side screens, a broadcast began to play automatically. It showed alien newscasters speaking rapidly, footage looping behind them, ships being recalled, colonies going into lockdown, a human flag being projected on 1,000 worlds with the caption, "The planet that commands gravity." Zarlen looked uneasy. Do you see what's happening? Panic spreads faster than truth. You've changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Elena's voice softened. No, I've reminded you there was never balance. You've lived on top of gravity. We lived within it. Suddenly the lights flickered again. The councillors tensed. Vareth turned sharply toward her. Are you doing this? Elena shook her head. No, that's your fear talking to it. The flickering stopped as quickly as it began. The air felt heavy for a moment, as if the room itself had inhaled and held its breath. Vareth leaned forward. You said before that gravity listens. What happens when it hears fear? Elena looked directly at him. It mirrors it. That's why your world shakes now. For a long time, no one spoke. Then quietly she added, but it doesn't have to. You could listen too? Zarlen's tone was bitter. Listen to what? A human fairy tale? To the silence, she said. That's where truth hides. She turned toward the viewport, where the curve of Earth shimmered far away, blue, bright, small against the black. The galaxy laughs at Earth because it's heavy, she continued softly. But heaviness keeps us grounded. It reminds us where we belong. You drift above the stars and call it freedom. We walk under them and call it strength. Vareth looked at her for a long moment, then spoke quietly. You realize what you've done, don't you? You've made every empire question its power. Elena smiled faintly. Then maybe they'll stop pretending they understand it. The guards approached again, unsure whether to treat her as a prisoner or a guest. Vareth raised a hand. Leave her, no chains. Not anymore. As the chamber emptied, he remained seated, staring at the dented table where she'd stood earlier. They laughed at Earth, he whispered to himself. And now they're afraid to breathe in front of it, outside the station's hull. A faint gravitational ripple passed through the nearby moons, so subtle no sensor could detect it, but strong enough that every world that night seemed to feel a slight pull toward Earth, as if the universe itself was leaning in to listen. The Galactic Council chamber was quieter than it had ever been. Days had passed since Elena's final demonstration, but the fear she left behind refused to fade. Entire empires had halted trade with Earth, not out of hostility, but out of silent dread. No one wanted to be the first to provoke a planet that could whisper to gravity itself. On the outer edge of the station, Inside a transparent docking bay, Elena stood before a small human shuttle, the Horizon. Its silver hull gleamed faintly in the blue light of the nearest star. A single pilot seat waited inside, and the ship's engines hummed softly, as if alive. Around her, alien guards stood watching, not daring to move too close. Vareth approached slowly, his long cloak brushing the metal floor. He stopped a few meters away, eyes fixed on her. "The Council voted," he said at last. "You're to be escorted safely to your planet. They've decided it's better to keep peace than to risk understanding you." Elena smiled faintly. "Peace through ignorance," she said. "That's not peace, Counselor. That's silence." Vareth hesitated, then stepped closer. "Maybe silence is what we need. The galaxy isn't ready for what you showed us. You've made us question our laws, our science, even our place in the cosmos." Elena turned toward the stars, visible through the glass walls. "That's what truth always does." He studied her for a moment. "Tell me, Dr. Ward, was this your plan, to make us fear Earth?" She shook her head. "No, fear is your own creation. All I did was remind you of what you forgot, that the universe doesn't belong to the cleverest species. It belongs to those who respect it." Vareth looked down, his expression unreadable. "There are whispers in the Council. They think Earth might rise again, that humanity could become the next empire." She turned her gaze back to him. "Empires rise to control. We learned long ago that control is an illusion. We're not here to rule you, Counselor. We're here to grow past needing to." For a moment neither spoke. The station's engines hummed like a distant storm. Then Elena stepped into her ship and powered up the controls. The cockpit lights flickered to life, illuminating her calm face. Vareth raised a hand. "Dr. Ward, one last question. You said gravity listens. What if someday it stops?" Elena paused, her hand on the throttle. "Then it'll be because we stopped listening first." The hatch closed, and the Horizon drifted out from the docking bay. As it moved into open space, the ship's thrusters glowed faintly, but something else began to happen. A ripple, invisible to the naked eye, spread outward from the ship. The nearby observation decks trembled. Instruments spiked. Inside the council chamber, Zarlen rushed to the window. "What's she doing?" he shouted. "She's bending the station's gravity field." Vareth didn't answer. He simply watched. Out in the void, the Horizon tilted slightly and accelerated. But instead of following a standard flight path, the ship seemed to sink into space itself, as if the void had become liquid. For a brief moment, the ship's outline shimmered like a reflection on water, and then it vanished without a trace. A silence followed. The sensors flatlined. The ship was gone. Vareth stood there for a long time before finally whispering, "So this is how humanity travels now. Not through space, but through gravity." Hours later, across the Council's broadcast network, a transmission appeared. It was marked Priority Alpha and originated from deep within the Sol system. The image flickered into view. Elena Ward's face, calm and composed, framed by the soft blue glow of Earth behind her. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice steady and clear. "This is Dr. Elena Ward, speaking on behalf of humanity. You once called us primitive. You laughed at our gravity, at our weakness. But gravity is not weakness, it's connection. It's the thread that ties every star, every world, every life together." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "You built your civilizations by escaping it, by drifting free from the worlds that birthed you. But freedom without belonging is emptiness. You drift above your own truths." The image zoomed out slightly, revealing the curve of Earth behind her, clouds swirling like silver ribbons. "We are not your enemies. We do not seek war or power. But if you ever threaten our home, understand this: we will not rise to fight. We will pull you down, because that is what gravity does. It brings arrogance back to the ground." Her words echoed across the galaxy. Ships halted mid-flight. Empires silenced their transmissions. Somewhere in the depths of space, a massive warship recalibrated its trajectory. Sensors detecting a strange gravitational anomaly surrounding Earth's orbit, a faint but constant pulse. "Like a heartbeat," Elena continued, her tone softer now. You asked what humanity intends. We intend to remember, to stay grounded while reaching for the stars. And maybe one day when you're ready to listen, we'll teach you what gravity really is. The broadcast ended. For a moment there was only static. Then silence spread like a wave through the galactic network. In the council chamber, Vareth leaned back in his chair, exhausted. She just changed the meaning of power, he murmured. Zarlen stood beside him, pale and shaken. How do you fight something that doesn't want to fight? Vareth looked at him slowly. You don't. You learn from it. That night, for the first time in centuries, the stars above the council world seemed closer. A little brighter, a little heavier. Ships orbiting nearby reported minor gravitational distortions, subtle but constant, all pointing toward one direction, Earth, and on that small blue planet, under a quiet night sky, Dr. Elena Ward stood by an open window, feeling the air move softly against her skin. Far above, satellites and ships traced their silent paths, and beneath her feet, the Earth hummed with a deep, gentle rhythm, as if the planet itself was breathing. She smiled faintly and whispered, "They laughed at our gravity. Now they finally understand it." The stars shimmered in response, and for the first time in history, the galaxy listened.